Hello, and today we are going to talk about defining what chiaroscuro is. That's our big 10-penny word for the week. And this is an excellent example of it. It's creating lots of drama through lightness and darkness and contrast. So chiaroscuro relies on value and form, which is what we did last week. For some of the exercises this week and also for the studio week, you must have done the form week as well. So some of the questions that we're going to look at are: what is chiaroscuro? Where did chiaroscuro start? When did chiaroscuro start? And what's the effect of chiaroscuro? So chiaroscuro is a technique and it's an aesthetic. It's the use of value to create form in painting and drawing, and it's also used to create drama and tension. When you were doing the form week, your drawings were supposed to be realistic recordings of the value and using that value to make things look 3D. Chiaroscuro adds in some spice. It makes it be a bit more dramatic. Sorry, headphone problems. Okay, so this is how it's used in some things. This is drawing and a print by Albert Dürer. And you can see how the hands are super realistic. They are pointed out, all of their details, but the background is pretty much neutral and there isn't as much effort put forth on the sleeves. That draws the attentions to the hands. In painting, that strong use of light and dark, it creates illumination. This is Girl with a Pearl Earring, one of the world's most famous paintings. And the way the light hits her face and her skin and gives her expression and character while the whole background is very dark. Photography, again the emphasis, and this is by Man Ray, a very important photographer of the 1900s, early 1900s. One of the first people to use photography as an art form instead of just as a journalistic form. The light on the face really accents the face, and then in the later set the hands, but especially the texture of the hair, the dark lips that are very dramatic, and it creates this image that's almost a floating head because the dark cloth on the body kind of fades into the background. Very dramatic. In film, one of the best examples is Jack Nicholson's Joker from the original Batman movie, and that extreme use of the face painting, which has kind of become evolved in popular culture, but to create that expression and that very dramatic look. The whole film, the Batman film, was shot with chiaroscuro to create that feeling of an ominous kind of dark place, Gotham. So chiaroscuro began in Europe. Italy was the nexus, or the first place for it. Da Vinci is credited for making it popular because he was one of the most well-known artists even then, and if he did something, it was a trendsetter. People would copy it. It was used heavily by other artists like Rembrandt and Caravaggio. In Caravaggio's image over here, where you have the, actually that's one of the saints that has fallen off his horse because of having a vision or whatever. Anyway, the strong light comes down, it illuminates him laying there, and especially his arms, his face. And then the way the light falls on the white part of the horse, it directs it right down to the body. And then the rest is all dark and mysterious. It began in the Renaissance, around 15th century. And it started with just paper and using white and black on neutral paper. Neutral paper because most paper wasn't white then. That was before they bleached paper. You guys are used to highly processed bleached paper. The original paper was kind of a tannish gray color, and it was very rough. So they would draw on it with black and white, and it kind of developed using heavy contrast to create light and shadow to capture things such as cloth. This is a study for a later painting where the artist was figuring out how to show how cloth would be draped across a body. And this is obviously a person sitting down. There's his thighs, knee, other knee, legs, and feet. So the overall effect of chiaroscuro, it's light was used to create form and to add realism instead of lines. The minute you put an outline on an object, you flatten it and you make it very designish, which can be good in some ways, but the whole aspect of chiaroscuro is creating the illusion that things are very three-dimensional, very real, and that mimics the way we see things. We do not see sharp outlines around objects. Objects turn back into space, and we see highlight, shadow, and contrast. The drama is created between the contrast of light and dark, and that is used to enhance the meaning of images. And then light was also used symbolically, especially in religious paintings like the one that you see over here by Svarin, where the light's shining down on his face. This is a monk and his robe, and he's looking up. The light represented heaven, and then the dark tones was the ignorance of humans. So comparing these, the one on the left does not use chiaroscuro. It has outlines around forms. Everything's painted with kind of mid-range values. There's a little bit of shading. And it's very flat. It's a good painting. It's more of a sequential or cartoon kind of style to it than the one on the right, which was painted using chiaroscuro. And you can see how distance recedes behind the figures. The figures look much more rounded, more realistic. There isn't that sharp line that you see over here with her nose and her hand. Instead, it kind of fades and flows into other things. Likewise, the painting of the same saint, St. Francis, on the right here, before chiaroscuro, very outlined, very flat. And then on the left with chiaroscuro, not only showing the form more realistically, but also symbolically. In this first painting, they would symbolize heaven's light by a halo. You guys have seen halos, usually on top of angels and things. And that's a very ancient way of showing a connection to the divine. On the left, instead of having an actual halo around his head, his face is illuminated from the light. So Rembrandt selfies, a self-portrait, is a painting, drawing, or photo of the artist by the artist, just like selfies that you might take today with your phone. And Rembrandt used chiaroscuro to document himself as he changed over the years. He painted a lot of portraits of himself, starting when he was very young. And he was known for using chiaroscuro. So for dramatic, lighting. So here he's a very young man, a late teenager, and then he goes into his 20s, and this is like 40s, 50s, up until he was very old. All realistic, and you can see how his face kind of changes and evolves throughout time, and you can tell by his expression, sometimes he's happier than other times, sometimes he's sad, and sometimes he's just kind of puzzled. So your assignment, and for this you need a camera. Your cell phone camera is absolutely fine. It's a little bit harder on a Chromebook, or you could use traditional drawing materials if you prefer. But you need to create a self-portrait that uses chiaroscuro to create dramatic effects. So you can use photography or drawing. It needs to be a portrait of you with strong light and dark contrast. With photography, you can play with the editing filters and adjustments. If you're drawing, use value to shade dramatically. A good idea if you're doing photography is to convert it to black and white first, and then play around with your settings, your filters and your contrast to create something that's very dramatic, like the picture on the right. And then upload it. That's it.